This is episode 17 with Caroline Beaton.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Brian Tier.
Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, episode 17, and today I'm very excited to be speaking to Caroline Beaton. Now, if you're not sure who Caroline is, she's pretty much the perfect guest for the show, as she's both an expert on millennials as well as a quarter life comeback success story herself. After coming across one of her articles and doing my research, which is the professional term for social media stalking, I realized just how awesome Caroline's story was and immediately reached out to have her on the show. Now, Caroline moved to Canada after graduating and doing a bit of traveling, but soon found herself pretty unhappy in her work and life situation. She then created herself a 4-month boot camp for getting out of her quarter life crisis and creating her ideal life. And she's now gone from a secretary to self-employed at just 24 years of age. Caroline now writes about the psychology of millennials at work for some of the biggest publications in the world, including Forbes, The Huffington Post, and Psychology Today. In this episode, you're going to learn Caroline's 6-step boot camp for going from secretary to self-employed, why the quarter life crisis has become so common and why it's actually essential. Can you have a life you love and a successful career? How to fuel and integrate multiple passions when you absolutely shouldn't take the leap, and a surprising finding about millennials at work. As always, you can catch all the links and resources we mentioned in the show notes, which is at briantier.com/017. I really love this interview, and I'm sure you're going to too. So without further ado, let's go hang out with Caroline. Welcome back, everyone, and an even bigger welcome to today's guest. It's none other than Caroline Beaton. Caroline, welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback.
Hi, thanks for having me, Brian.
No, it's a pleasure to have you on. Now, Caroline, I think we connected through Twitter. I think it was through an article of yours that I read on quarter life crises, which we'll get to later. But I wonder if you could just tell everyone listening who is Caroline Beaton and walk us through your quarter life journey.
Sure. So I currently write on the psychology of millennials at work for Forbes, Huffington Post, Psychology Today, but it wasn't always quite such a peachy, well-tied-up story. I graduated college and moved to Vancouver with my then boyfriend and became a legal secretary at a law firm. And I basically just floundered for 9 months. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had a lot of passions, as I've come to learn that many millennials have, but I didn't know how to integrate them and how to make money from them. And so a lot of my writing pertains to helping millennials figure out what to do with their lives and how to find direction and purpose and fulfillment. And then the other part of what I do is content marketing and brand strategy for clients, specifically clients who are trying to reach a millennial audience.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think so many people listening will resonate with that, like having a lot of passions and not knowing how to make them work and being unhappy where they currently are. And you said that it wasn't always like this. On your website, you mentioned you gave yourself like a 4-month boot camp. And, you know, in your article on Forbes and your own site, you mentioned like 6 steps that you went through to turn your situation around. I wonder if you could briefly go through that for everyone listening.
Yeah, sure. Let me just remember these 6 steps, actually.
I think they were kind of
for you. What I write about on Ryan Robinson's website, and if your listeners aren't familiar with Ryan Robinson, he's an entrepreneur and a business coach who specifically helps entrepreneurs figure out their side hustle while they have a full-time job. And I wrote a blog for him, which was called something like the 6 personal development steps I took toward professional mastery or something like that. And it entailed exactly what I did in that 4-month boot camp when I was really lost and floundering in Vancouver. And they all revolve around really, one, keeping my interests open and figuring out without any expectation or previous conceptions of what I wanted to be or what I was to my passions and what I really cared about. And a lot of that was done through my sketchbook. I'm such a journaling fan. So I wrote down little things that interested me, and I read as much as I could. I became a student of myself. And then I tried to apply those passions outward, which is a section in there called something like integrating my passions. And that's where I literally created like a flow chart, which you can see on that blog, where I wrote down everything that I love to do, and I created little lines between them. Like, how could I integrate my passion for psychology with creative writing, for example? How could I add drawings to my writing? That kind of thing. And that is ultimately where my personal brand was born out of. And it's really been a fulfilling path for me, because I started with that question of, why do I want to do what I want to do, and where do I want to go with it, and how will that bring me personal fulfillment in the long term?
Yeah, perfect. And I'll link up the article you wrote on his website and the Forbes one and the one on your site too, so people can go and read that. I think it was really cool reading it, and also seeing for myself like the kind of steps you went through, and some really valuable stuff there, like focusing on one thing at a time. That's something I struggled with.
Mm-hmm. And I do think I'm a little wary of being a part of the self-improvement field, because I do think it can get so wishy-washy. And part of my intention for that specific article was to help readers be strategic, because that's really what I did. I was strategic. I had a plan. It was really a boot camp to me. It wasn't just navel gazing. It was actively asking myself what I wanted to do and how I wanted to contribute outward to the world specifically.
Yeah, and that's why I love your articles, is because they are grounded in psychology research. It's not just someone's opinion on a website. And the fact that do you do all your drawings for your blog articles?
Yes, I do. I have some internal struggles with them, because I'm not a very good drawer, as people will see if they look at my stuff. But that was one of those decisions where I just decided I needed to start, and I've been starting ever since, and I think I'm getting slightly better.
No, I absolutely love them. And I think you probably have like the coolest Instagram profile as well. I'll link to that in the show notes for sure.
Oh, thank you.
So, Caroline, you've gone through this process where you basically design your own workday and design your work around your life. I'm interested to hear what your daily or morning routine looks like now.
Yeah, sure. So I really revamped my morning routine about 3 months ago, and that started with me getting up an hour earlier. So I used to get up at around 8 a.m. I know that seems really late for those of you who work traditional jobs, but 8 a.m. seemed early to me. I was never, ever a morning person. And so I got up an hour earlier. I started getting up at around 6:30, 6:45. Now, realistically, I get up at 7, but that still gives me a solid hour before I always start work at 8 a.m. That's one of those rituals that I have to keep to in order to give structure to my day. And so that hour before I start work is really dedicated to sort of what I call receiving, which is reading and journaling and just taking time to be with myself in sort of a meditative state. I actually don't have a meditation practice, though I do practice yoga regularly, but just being with myself and looking out my window really provides the restoration I need in order to then, once I start work at 8 a.m., start giving part of myself to the world, whether it's through my passion or my skills or my conversations over podcasts and writing, etc.
Yeah. And what kind of stuff are you reading in the mornings? Is it fiction or nonfiction?
So I was a psychology, I was a psychoanalysis minor in college, and then I was a creative writing major in college. So you'd think that I would love to read fiction, but I actually decided in my self-development phase in Vancouver that I don't really like reading fiction. So I've come around to reading a lot of psychology books. I'm a huge fan of David Brooks, and one of my favorite psychologists is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I can give his name, so you can link that up in the show notes. But he's really amazing. So a lot of psychology applied to life. So I really am reading what I want to do ultimately and actually am doing every day, but those unique perspectives serve to inspire me.
Cool. So, Caroline, as I mentioned in the intro, I think I came across you through an article you wrote about quarter-life crises. With what you know about millennials now and all the research you've done, why is it that the quarter-life crisis has become so common and so popular?
Right. So I think one of the main reasons that I certainly suffered from myself is a version of analysis paralysis or opportunity/option overload, which is basically just fancy ways of saying we're faced with so many opportunities these days, regardless of our economic opportunity, which is highly debated in the media, as I'm sure you and your listeners know. We have opportunity online that really is absolutely unprecedented. And so when we graduate college, it's not a traditional option of going into a 9-to-5 and working for a corporation and staying there for 30, 40, 50 years, whatever it is. Suddenly, we're faced with the option to travel or to make money online or to have a side gig or to have a regular job. And if you're going to have a regular job, what kind of regular job could that be? You can find 1,000,001 online. So I think those options really paralyze us because we're worried that we'll do the wrong thing. And though we feel young, we also feel this immense pressure and urgency to make something of the opportunity and the potential we've been given.
Yeah, it's huge. Now, a lot of us think that we need to choose between a work type life or a life that we actually enjoy and that fuels our passions. Is it a case of having to choose, or can we have both?
I think we can have both, but it's important to define what both actually means. I just wrote an article on simplifying your priorities, and at the heart of it is understanding what your values are, which again goes back to the self-development and introspection thing. I think millennials need to understand what they actually want from their lives and from their careers, which are big questions, but we have to have them. And so in that sense, quarter-life crises are actually essential. That kind of turmoil helps us determine what actually matters to us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that. Like, it doesn't have to be seen as a negative thing. It can be a positive thing that causes that introspection. It's kind of like Ryan Holiday's "The Obstacle is the Way."
Yes, definitely. And Robert Frost or whoever said the only way out is through.
Cool. So, Caroline, you mentioned in the beginning that you had all these passions, and I think it was on your website you said you skirted the crevices of your passions, committing to none of them. If someone's listening to this and they feel like there's so many things they're interested in, but they feel like they're not committing to any of them, what would you say to that person? Like, how do they deal with that, with having too many passions?
So I would say, one, get all of those things out on paper. I'm just such a huge believer on getting everything that's running around in your brain and causing you anxiety out onto paper where you can organize it then internally. So get it onto paper, and then I would suggest to zoom out. So we feel like we have 1,000,000 different passions. What I learned when I integrated my passions is that they actually had a lot in common. So for example, psychology, creative writing, and art all had a very human aspect. And I found that I was committed to and passionate about helping people become their best selves. And in that way, all those passions connected. So I would suggest to find the overarching theme between your passions. And I know it can feel overwhelming and like your passions are totally disparate, but my guess is when you get them out all on paper and then you start to really zoom out and try to understand what the core constituents of each passion are, then you'll really be able to see the common themes that you can then pursue, which will give you direction.
And that also, I'm sure, sheds some light on how to go about picking that side hustle, which you speak about as well.
Yes, certainly. Once you know what you want, it is way easier to find a side hustle. And another benefit of side hustle, which is more on the logistical and professional development side versus the personal development side, is it's really critical training. I wouldn't have been able to take the leap into self-employment and creating what's really turned out to be the career of my dreams unless I had the training I needed to do what could ultimately connect my passions.
Yeah, I love this because often people come up and speak to me and say, like, I really hate what I'm doing. And okay, I kind of set the example of jumping ship and just quitting my full-time job. But now when people come to me and speak to me about this, I actually tell them, well, stay put for the meantime and realize that your current job is a means to an end. And yeah, I mean, if it's not serving the end that you want, then maybe you could look around for a different day job, but don't just like quit and start your own thing straight away. Which I loved in your articles in your about section and stuff. You mentioned like you saw the job as training into what you actually wanted to do one day. So I think that was really valuable for people too.
I really think that sometimes our particular field or domain encourages the taking the leap. But I write about this in my article, How I Became My Own Boss by Age 25, that really taking the leap has nothing to do with leaping. For me, it was a very strategic step-by-step process. And for millennials, or really anyone who feels like they don't have any direction in their career or they don't know what to do with their life, the last thing I recommend is that they take the leap and become self-employed. I think that it's really hard to find direction if you're not surrounded by other people and if you're not familiar with the paths that already exist.
Yeah, something that just came to mind when you mentioned taking the leap when you're not sure what you want to do is travel. Like we hear so many millennials say, I'm just going to go and travel. And I know you did that for a bit before landing in Canada and then eventually heading back home. Could you maybe just share your thoughts on millennials traveling, maybe when they don't know what they want?
So I want to tread carefully here because I understand that many people have had experiences that differ from mine. And I know that many really attribute travel to changing their life and affirming their direction, etc. But for me, traveling was a mode of procrastination that in many ways didn't get me any closer to understanding what I wanted to do with my life. Because in my opinion, the best way to understand what you want to do with your life is by trying things out. And traveling, unless what you want to do with your life has something to do with traveling, is a way of procrastinating on what you want to do with your life because you're really not doing anything. You're traveling around and you might be developing yourself personally, but you're not trying on any professional paths. And so to me, it's hard to get direction when you're traveling.
Yeah, the other thing is, I mean, we've spoken personally via email and stuff, but so you'll know, like I've been on the verge of major travel myself. And once those plans started to materialize, I started becoming way more grateful of everything I already have here. And like the lifestyle I ideally want to live, I realized like I can actually do most of that here already. And I think often travel is kind of like an easy way out, or like you say, a way to procrastinate on doing that difficult, unsexy work. But eventually that's going to come back anyway.
Yes, I agree. If someone needs to procrastinate or they need a break or a space, I understand that, but I think that we should acknowledge that for what it is and not feel that going to some foreign country will get us closer to our purpose.
Cool. Now, Caroline, you've written for some of the biggest publications like Forbes and Huffington Post and Psychology Today. And I think you have some of the best headlines and content I've come across. I really love your writing style. I wonder if you could share some surprising findings you've made regarding millennials at work.
Sure. So one of my articles, which has gotten a good deal of traction recently, is my Forbes article, Millennials, This Is Why You Haven't Been Promoted. And this specific article touches on the psychological reasons that millennials sabotage themselves from career advancement. And my very first point is that millennials overwork. And this is pretty counterintuitive because we graduate college and we've been told by our parents and really everyone that hard work is the key to success. And don't get me wrong, a work ethic is absolutely integral to our success and finding fulfillment even. But millennials make the mistake of brown nosing, as I've called it, early in their career, which actually sabotages their promotion prospects. And this is why. So the CEO of Fort Interactive, his name is Slade Sunder, talked to me about how millennials who overwork essentially devalue themselves as a dispensable commodity, because instead of becoming known for solving problems and offering solutions, they become known for doing a lot of work at the same amount of pay. And so instead, what millennials need to do is become problem solvers and not widget makers, as he puts it. And it is so counterintuitive to millennials because we want to work hard and impress our supervisors. And in fact, our supervisors even report that they want to promote millennials who will take on additional projects. But we have to define ourselves by our skills and have those critical conversations with our employers about what we uniquely bring to a company rather than just the hours we can provide for them.
Yeah, and it also comes back to right in the beginning and like the start of your boot camp, where if you're just working all the time, you neglecting yourself. And you said as well, like the first thing you did was decide what's important to you and prioritize taking care of yourself. And then once that personal development started kicking into gear, then the professional development comes after that. But if we're just neglecting ourselves, we're not going to be at our best anyway.
Yes, definitely.
Cool. So Caroline, if millennials out there are listening to this and they feel stuck in an unfulfilling job and they're looking to change things up or looking to start, changing their situation towards what they want to work for, what 3 tips would you give them to go about doing that?
I think I've kind of already touched on them, but I'll repeat them for clarity's sake. The first thing I would have them do is write everything down. And by everything, I mean really write down what's weighing on you or stressing you or what you feel like is half done or undone or should do or want to do. And once you have all that down, then you can go through and simplify your priorities and figure out what of all those things you've put pressure on yourself to do, because we do put so much pressure on ourselves to do all these options we're presented with, and figure out how you want to zoom out. In that, I think it's important to ask yourself what your key core values are. So for me, my key core value regarding my profession is to help millennials become more successful in work and life by helping them develop the habits they need to succeed. So having that overarching life mission really helps me simplify what I need to do in order to make that happen. And then if I'm faced with the prospect of a podcast interview or an email or an opportunity that's not directly in line with that mission, then it becomes easier to turn down. So that's the first and second one. 1 is write everything down. 2 is zoom out and define your values. And then 3 is figure out how to schedule out the individual tasks required for each priority in a given time frame. So it really depends on what your specific time frame was or is. Mine was 4 months, as I said. But it can be anything, but it's important to have that time frame or a deadline to say, this is when I need this to be done. Because otherwise, your priorities and your life goals just become too daunting and you'll never do them. I think it was Tony Robbins who said that we typically overestimate what we can do in a year, but underestimate what we can do in a decade. So really being realistic about both the tasks that we need to do in order to accomplish our life goals and further our purpose, and the timeline for those tasks can help us feel like we're empowered and can take control of our careers.
Cool. Got it. Caroline, I do want to be mindful of the time. It's really early and really late there. But for people listening to this, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of them that want to connect with you and and find out more about the work you're doing, where can they do so?
Sure. You can find me at carolinebeaton.com. And I have it's a 5-day-a-week newsletter that I send out to a mostly millennial audience. And it's on research-backed motivation that helps us succeed in our careers. And I love writing it, and I would love your listeners to subscribe to it. So that's carolinebeaton.com/sign-up.
Cool. And I'll link to all the social profiles and the awesome Instagram profile and all the links and resources we mentioned in this episode. And that'll be at briantier.com/017. Caroline, before I get on to the final question, I just want to acknowledge you for taking the proactive steps towards changing your situation and not just accepting things as they were, but actually, making the change and going through this boot camp and this process that you went through, and now paying it forward and inspiring others to do the same through your writing. The final question that I have is, and I know we've probably touched on it again many times, but what one thing can listeners do, just if they had to do one thing this week to start creating their quarter life comeback, what would you say?
If they don't have one, get a journal or a sketchbook.
I love that. Caroline, thanks so much for coming on the Quarter Life Comeback, and I'm sure we'll be in touch further.
Thanks so much, Brian. I love what you're doing.
And there you have it, guys. That wraps up episode 17 of the Quarter Life Comeback podcast. And a really cool interview with Caroline. If you enjoyed it as much as I did recording it, then please do share it around with your friends and shoot me a tweet at Brian Tier and let me know what some of your biggest takeaways were, some of the key points you got from this interview. For me, I think, the quarter life crisis is such a common thing, especially when it comes to people's work situations. And I just want to thank Caroline again for her work and for coming and sharing that on the Quarter Life Comeback. As I said, you can catch all the links and resources we mentioned at the show notes, which you'll find at briantier.com/017. And to get all these episodes as soon as they come out, make sure you go subscribe at quarterlifecomeback.com. But till next week, guys, keep creating your quarter life comeback.
Thanks for listening to the Quarter Life Comeback. Get started today by visiting briantier.com.